This podcast is brought to you by Most Valuable Podcasts, leading the league in podcasting entertainment.
What's up, everybody? Ricky Widmer here, along with the one, the only, Brandon Swanson.
Hey.
And we are back for another edition of the Primetime Podcast right here on Most Valuable Podcast. If you're on YouTube, hello. It is great to see your faces yet again today. If you're on Blog Talk Radio, iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn Radio, it is great to have you guys hear our voices. We can't really hear your voices, but if we could, it would be absolutely stupendous. But we got a jam-packed show today looking at Michigan football. Shea Patterson going to be their new quarterback. Going to look NBA draft, going to look NFL draft. But before we get into everything, and then also we've got bowl picks to make for this week. Bowl games start on Saturday the 16th. But before we do, a little bit of housekeeping. Number one, MVP t-shirts like the one that, if you're on the YouTube channel, you see me wearing it right now. Go ahead and get yourselves one of these t-shirts. We've got small through extra large. It's all down below in the description.
So if you're not one of those sizes, just lose a little bit of weight and it'll be fine.
I mean,
then you can get one.
You know what? If you're bigger than that, send us an email. We'll figure it out. But send us an email, mostvaluablepodcast@gmail.com. Give us your name, your age, your address. We'll send you all the details to get everything squared in order. And we're actually using squared, so there's a pun there. Squared in order. And then you can get yourselves an MVP t-shirt. Number two, patreon.com. If you have not checked it out, check that out. If you like what we're doing here, want to help support us, like Jake, Christian, Patrick, you can go ahead and do that. Patreon.com/mostvaluablepodcast. And then the last thing is on iTunes. Give us that 5-star rating. Give the Primetime Podcast, the Fast Break, the Onside Kick, the Rick and Johnny Podcast, all 5 stars. And the last thing, I lied to you guys because I just remembered, link is going to be down below in the description. We got a Bowl Mania pool. Brandon picked all the games. Well, not right now, but eventually. Brandon will have picked all the games. I will have picked all the games. Just straight pick. No confidence going. So if you want to be in our Bowl Mania pool, that link down below in the description as well. Winner will get like a $20 gift card, either like B-Dubs or Amazon or something like that. So you're going to win something, and you can compete against me and Brandon to see how many bowl games against teams that you never watched before, except when you get to the New Year's 6 games, that and you can see if you're correct.
And you may still not watch them.
Yeah, you may still.
That's okay.
You may just say, oh, well, I picked that team. Good thing they won. But Brandon, we got a jam-packed show. Let's get right into it. First one, we're talking Michigan football. They get Shea Patterson, transfer from Ole Miss. This was his first year starting for Ole Miss. He's been there since 2016. This past year had over 2,000 yards, completion percentage of over 60, 17 touchdowns, 9 interceptions, and pretty much a lost season for Ole Miss after the whole Hugh Freeze exit / drama / situation, whatever you want to call it, for the Rebels. What I want to ask you, though, with Michigan getting Shea Patterson now, what does this mean for Michigan football?
Well, I think that it's certainly a good thing. If you remember, Shea Patterson was a former number 1 overall quarterback recruit in the 2016 class, and it didn't pan out there at Ole Miss. You know, a lot of different factors. Certainly with the head coach leaving due to poor circumstances with him going. But 23 touchdowns, 12 interceptions in his not even full 2 seasons there, because he didn't get in full games in both years. But then he also threw for 3,000 yards in his 2 years. So that's impressive. He did a lot of things that I think people liked. And he will bring a lot of athleticism and talent to the quarterback position. But let me tell you is that Michigan, I think, was already going to be in a good spot at the quarterback position before Shea Patterson, because I want to talk about a guy now too is Brandon Peters. Brandon Peters, a guy who came in after Wilton Spate was done, after O'Korn was done, and Peters comes in 3 games with Michigan, 486 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. The coaching staff didn't really allow him to air the football out down the field. They were very conservative with him, but he did a good job. He did a really good job. He showed a lot of athleticism. He showed a lot of poise. A 4-star pro-style quarterback recruit in the 2016 class, so the same class as Shea Patterson. Brandon Peters also now has 2 years on Shea Patterson, and he's going to be the starter in the Outback Bowl against South Carolina. So he has one more opportunity to show why he should be the starter heading into the offseason then. So I don't necessarily think Shea Patterson, I do believe he's coming over here to Michigan because he fully intends that he can be the starter over here. But I do not believe that Shea Patterson coming over here automatically means that Shea Patterson will be the starter, because they have a slew. Michigan has a slew of quarterbacks on their roster. You've got Shea Patterson now coming over. You have Brandon Peters, Dylan McCaffrey, Joe Milton, Kevin Doyle. They have a lot of guys there. All of these guys with pretty good talent, with Doyle probably being the one that isn't, you maybe wouldn't put him in the group with the rest of them, but he is still a guy, part of the 2018 recruiting class that was named Washington, D.C.'s 2017-2018 Gatorade State Football Player of the Year. So that's not some small accomplishment. The reason I bring this up is because we want to talk about Shea Patterson in this segment, but I think it's also important to understand that Shea Patterson coming over here, as good as he is, as good as he can be, Michigan, I think, is going to be poised for a better year at quarterback, better years at quarterback in the future, just by what they already had on their roster.
Well, the big thing I think of is another thing you have to put in there is Shea Patterson is now coming over. He missed most of, let's see, what game was it? So ever since the LSU game, that was the last game he played, end of October, had missed the rest of the season from October 21st on with a knee injury. So nursing that, of course, you're going to be like, well, in the offseason, he should be able to rehab that up. But when he gets back out onto the field, how is that going to be a little bit different? Because whenever it's the knee, it's all about coming back no matter what it is, coming back and trusting it. Especially with a quarterback, you use your legs and your knees to plant and throw off of when you throw the football. So that's something with Patterson that I want to look at is how do you come back from that knee injury? The second thing is, I don't care who you are. Don't, like you said, don't expect Shea Patterson to start right away. And I'm not saying it's like, oh, Shea Patterson sucks, he doesn't deserve. No. They have so many people here, and it's kind of like what Jim Harbaugh said a couple years ago when they were talking about the quarterback situation for this year. He said, and the quote was, it will be a mediocrity at its best. Roll the balls out there and let them play. That's what we're going to get in the spring. Peters will come in, Patterson will come in, this quarterback, that quarterback, McCaffrey. Let's roll them balls out there. Let's let these boys play, and Harbaugh will pick the best one to start. The thing that I think that this gives the Michigan football Wolverines, though, tried to do a New York football Giants thing there, it didn't quite work, is by giving you this competition in the spring, I think it will make whichever quarterback wins the job, it will make them even better to go up against teams like Ohio State. Ohio State's losing their quarterback. JT Barrett's going to be gone. You've got Saquon Barkley not going to be at Penn State. How are they going to overcome that with Ohio State and Penn State losing some guys? How is that going to help? And can this boost the Wolverines? Let's say Shea Patterson is the guy. Can he boost the Wolverines into contention to maybe win the Big Ten? Or can by him competing with Peters, if Peters wins the job, can that boost the Wolverines into a tier to win the Big Ten East?
Yeah, I think that right now Michigan is truly, I think they're sitting in one of the best quarterback spots that they could, because of just the slew of talent that they have at the quarterback position now on this roster. And last year was a tough year for Michigan, the worst under Harbaugh. But there were a lot of reasons why. You know, the defense was good at times and really bad at others. Offensively, the quarterback position struggled, and that led to everything else offensively really struggling. It just seemed like a kind of a trickle-down effect at that point. But I don't think you're going to see that this next year. I think Michigan has a really good chance to bounce back in a big way, because usually Harbaugh defenses are very strong, very good, and those guys this past year who were newer, they have a year under their belt, now going into a lot of them, for a lot of them, their sophomore seasons, they should be strong. And then you look at this quarterback spot. now I want to talk about just two of the guys. Again, I know this is going to be titled Shea Patterson, but really there's a lot more to talk about than just him.
Well, yeah, it's what does this mean for Michigan? So it was a whole kind of
Well, I was going to say, I mean, if you've got a guy on there, Joe Milton, number 7 pro-style quarterback in the nation. He received 27 offers, and some of those offers from Florida, Georgia, LSU, Miami, and Tennessee. So all of those schools, many of them SEC schools, then with a sprinkle of ACC in there, that's pretty impressive. And you go to Michigan, you go to a Big Ten conference, and you go to a Big Ten school, and then Kevin Doyle, he also had offers from Michigan State, Nebraska, Iowa, Indiana, Purdue. So clearly those teams believe that he can play, and he can play within the Big Ten and be successful. All of that talent means competition, as you mentioned. Competition is in place to make people better. We're going to find out over this offseason, and as we get into the beginning of next year, as we creep into September, August, September, October, we're going to be seeing who is the best quarterback on this Michigan roster and who wants it the most, who is going to fight for it the most, especially in camp when they get together and they do everything like that and they start getting out there doing drills and then really getting out there on the field. It's going to be exciting. This is an exciting time, I think, right now for the Michigan Wolverines because last year is in the past. You didn't have what you wanted out of your quarterback position. You didn't have what you wanted out of your season. This year, you can take it by the horns and I think really be able to have success again, with last year being a fluke season. But Shea Patterson, he comes in and he will make things better. He will certainly make things better just if it was him alone. But you have to go back and talk about what you had mentioned is that knee injury. How quickly can you come back from that knee injury? We've seen guys who have been able to come back, who have had knee injuries, who've been able to come back, who've been successful, and you haven't had any problems. But then you also look, and I want to kind of say this for athletes around sports, not just with football, because you have a lot of times athletes in the NBA. They come back and they're not the same player. They re-injure, try and come back again, and it's never fully healthy. Of course, you never want to see that, but that's always possibly a fear, that knee never fully gets the strength back. You never are able to have the mobility that you used to have, and that affects you then as you're trying to do different things because no longer having that mobility, you have to focus a little bit more on other areas. You have to do a little bit more, rely a little bit more on other muscles to be able to do things to overcompensate for the lack of strength in your knee. Now, is that going a little bit too far in depth and saying, being a little bit too, well, this could happen? You probably. But those are things that have happened, could happen, but of course we don't want to see.
Well, and I mean, back in the day, I'm not going to give specifics or anything, but back in the day when we were in college, you and I both called basketball games in college, and we remember seeing a player in our career, great player, this was basketball, by the way, starting lineup, power forward, they get injured, out for a full season, they come back that next year, and it's like, we were talking about this the other day, we were talking about this athlete, and we're going, wow, you know what, they were just never the same. They were just never the same, could never be that same player that they were that last year. And with Shea Patterson, we don't know if he's going to come back from this injury and be the same Shea Patterson, or if he's going to be different. The good thing is, he gets to do it in a change of scenery, gets to work with a Jim Harbaugh. Thing that I want to ask you, because we already mentioned McCaffrey, we already mentioned Peters, now you're throwing Patterson into the mix. Looking at Joe Milton and Kevin Doyle, the thing I want to ask you is I'm looking at 247sports.com, and let's say for Milton, they had for his, and I know these predictions mean diddly poo, to quote the great Jim Morris Sr., but just for an example, the two predictions for Joe Milton, they said 78% of people said he's going to Michigan. And these are writers and analysis guys for 247 Sports making these predictions. 22% said Florida. Whereas on the other hand, Kevin Doyle, 88 said he's going to commit to Ole Miss. 12% said Pitt. Do you see this affecting Michigan, this transfer where either Doyle or Milton go, hey, do I want to go to this crowded quarterback situation? Or since I've got the time, since I don't have to sign my letter of intent until February, I'm pulling out, I'm reopening my recruitment, and someone else can get me, and I'll commit to you and sign my letter of intent for you in February.
I think that's a good point to bring up. I think especially since you want to talk about Joe Milton first, Florida, they now have Dan Mullen. Dan Mullen is another guy. You talk about someone who's good with quarterbacks. I think Harbaugh would be one that you would want to certainly be with, but if you don't feel like you're going to be the main guy, then you have Mullen over here who you possibly could go with, who could possibly mold you. But again, I think you're still a young guy. You're still a young guy. You know, you've got some time to be able to sit and watch and wait and then get in there, bide your time and get in there. But if that's not for you, if that's not what you want to do, if you want to be a true freshman starting, then maybe you look elsewhere. But I do believe that there's a reason to be at Michigan. There's very many positive things at Michigan going on right now. I think moving from this past year, which again I'll say I think was a fluke off season for Michigan, they come to this year. There's going to be success this year and many years now down the line, certainly as long as Harbaugh is there. So that's for Milton. For Kevin Doyle, now I didn't hear about Pitt, but because I had mentioned with him all the other Big Ten schools.
And this is just me looking at the 24/7, like the writers and stuff make their predictions. 12% of the guys did say Pitt. So that's just where I'm pulling that from.
Or Ole Miss, you said right too. Ole
88% it said.
I didn't hear about either of those, but if I was Kevin Doyle and I saw that Shea Patterson was coming from Ole Miss because of the problems there, because in 2018 you're not going to be able to go to a bowl game, even if we were able to get there. I would stay away from them. I would stay away from them. And then Pitt, you know, it's kind of you do what you want to do, but you're with Michigan right now. You've got an opportunity to play for a really good program under a really good head coach. I'm pretty happy staying where I'm staying.
The thing that's the most interesting.
But it's interesting, not to cut you off, Ricky.
Yeah.
It's just one final thing. It's interesting that you bring that up because that could be a possibility. That could be something in the back of their minds, especially seeing a guy who, all right, well, you know, he comes in, he starts, Peters is behind him, maybe McCaffrey's behind them. McCaffrey's never taken a college snap, but, you know, where do I fall? It's like, where do I fall in this? But Joe Milton, one thing to note for him, he's a guy not afraid of competition, so he may thrive even more in this situation.
Well, and he's the one I wanted to bring up here right at the tail end before we move on into our next topic, because with him being, with seeing Florida as one of the teams, because it was Michigan and Florida were 1-2 for the predictions. If I'm Milton, I think he's the one that might take a little bit, might take a hot second to think about this, because you can come in where it's like, okay, you got Peters and Patterson are there. They're both upperclassmen guys. Or I can open up my recruitment, try to get to Florida, where, think about that Florida quarterback situation. We talked about it before when we had commenters say, well, don't expect Felipe Frank to be the guy. Like
Franks. Someone, some nasty asshole in the comments said something about it's Franks.
Felipe Franks, thank you for the correction. He's not going to be the ifdo facto starter. Like Matt Corral could come in, high school kid out of California. So with Milton not being afraid of competition, I wouldn't even rule that out as a possibility. That he'd be like, you know what? I can start as a freshman at Florida. I ain't afraid of this competition with Corral from California. I'm going to go there and beat Franks and Corral out and start my freshman year. But it all depends on what's going on, because obviously I don't know Milton, and I'm not on the pulse for Milton's recruitment and what he plans to do.
Well, see, that's why I would say that he would stay at Michigan because he's not afraid of competition.
Yeah,
and clearly at Michigan you have plenty of it. You know, with Peters from last year, who filled in this last year for a couple of games before he got injured and played well. You know, played well, and he didn't. I don't think really had a full playbook at his disposal. They didn't really open it up to him, I don't believe. And then you have Patterson coming in, and then you have all these other guys as well. You've got Doyle, you've got McCaffrey, you've got all these guys to try and go through to get to the top of the depth chart. And does that make you want to eat a little bit more, grind a little bit more, and stay here at Michigan? It might. It might. But, again, you don't know the mindset. Maybe that's more pushing you, like you said, Ricky, to go, well, I mean, I know I'm here, but I got a chance to possibly go to Florida, still be with a really good coach. They're trying to improve their team. You know, they're not gonna, you know, success is something hopefully coming to them soon. Maybe I go there, but I don't know. I'm not in his head. You're not either. We both mentioned that. Right now, we all know that they're currently Michigan Wolverines, and I would honestly, doesn't matter what I think, I would like them to all stay that way because I would love to see how this works out.
And the thing with Milton that makes it interesting is he is listed as a pro-style quarterback.
Yep.
So
the number 7 pro-style quarterback in the nation.
I don't know how much this plays into it, but there's two things. One, he's a Florida guy. So he's from the state of Florida. That might be one reason to think about it. But two, when it comes to Dan Mullen, it's like, which coach do I want to play for? Harbaugh's great. Mullen's great. But with Mullen, it's like, man, he got to work with Tim Tebow and Dak Prescott. What if I could be on the level of them? I know those are two guys where they're not pro-style guys, especially Tim Tebow is not a pro-style guy. But I wonder if that plays into it as we move down, especially with Shea Patterson now transferring over to Michigan. Before we move on, we're going to go on to the NBA draft. Any final thoughts between Michigan or anything with the Shea Patterson transfer?
Yeah, I would say with Milton, if he's a Florida guy, something clearly made him want to go all the way to Michigan to play there. He was one of the most sought-after quarterbacks in his class.
Could have been the situation.
And I think that you're in Florida already, and you're not wanting to go to Florida, and they're really, really trying to recruit you, and you go to Michigan. There's a reason you go to Michigan, and then there's a reason you probably want to stay at Michigan. So I think that having another transfer of Shea Patterson coming over, you don't want to make a split-second decision and then go somewhere where you may end up regretting it. Not that going to Florida or anywhere else that you could go would necessarily be regretting it. But you're in Michigan. You went there for a reason. I would want to stay there and play it out and see exactly what happens and be able to play with Harbaugh.
And just to put some perspective on it, Milton made his commitment on May 7th, 2017. So well before this season happened, well before the shit show we got to see in the swamp this year with the Florida Gators and then the firing of McElwain. He made his decision well before that. So maybe that doesn't even play into a factor. He's just, you know what, I'm a Michigan guy through and through. This is where I want you guys to come in. Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section. What does Shea Patterson mean to the Wolverines coming in? How does this help them? Will he be the starter? Will he not be the starter? Let us know what you guys think down below in the comment section.